The money in your pocket is not real, not in the way you think. It has no gold behind it, no silver, no land, no resource you can hold, measure, or verify. It is a number, printed on paper, backed by nothing but a promise. A terrifying part? The day that promise was broken, most people never noticed. Imagine this. It is August 1971, a Sunday night. The world is asleep. Markets are closed. Children are in bed. And in a quiet room inside the White House, a small group of men are about to make a decision that will change every economy, every salary, every debt, every dream, for every human being on this planet. They will end thousands of years of financial order in one night. No vote, no referendum, no warning, just a decision. And when the world wakes up on Monday, money will never mean the same thing again. To understand what was lost that night, you have to understand what money once was. For most of human civilization, money was honest. If you held a gold coin, you held something real, something that took labor to pull from the earth, something that could not be invented, something that existed before governments, before banks, before nations. Gold did not care who was president. It did not respond to speeches. It could not be printed. It was the one thing in the financial world that was completely, absolutely, brutally honest. And for centuries, the world built its economies around that honesty. After World War II, the world was exhausted. Europe was in ruins. Japan was ash. The old powers were broken, but America was standing. Factories were running. Its gold vaults were full. Fort Knox held more than 20,000 tons of gold, the largest concentration of monetary gold in human history. So in 1944, the world gathered in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods, and they made America the center of the financial universe. Every major currency in the world would be tied to the US dollar, and the US dollar would be tied to gold, fixed at exactly $35 per ounce. It was a simple, elegant contract. You hold dollars, America holds gold. If you ever want to convert, the door's open. The world ran on that contract for 25 years, and for a while, it worked. But here's what they never tell you in school. The system began to strain under pressure. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. The Vietnam War was bleeding money. Billions of dollars every month consumed by jungle warfare with no clear end. At the same time, President Johnson was building what he called the Great Society. Massive domestic spending programs, education, healthcare, poverty reduction. These were not bad ideas, but they were expensive ideas. And instead of raising taxes, which would cost votes, America did something far more dangerous. It expanded the money supply faster than its gold reserves could support. Not gold, not value, just dollars. More dollars than the gold in Fort Knox could ever justify. The contract was being violated, in secret, in silence. But the world was watching. France noticed first. President Charles de Gaulle stood before cameras in 1965 and said something that shocked the financial world. He said the US dollar should not have the exorbitant privilege of being the world's reserve currency. He sent French ships across the Atlantic, loaded with dollars, and demanded gold in return. Other countries followed. Britain asked for gold. Germany asked for gold. Country after country began knocking on America's door, holding dollars, demanding what they were owed, and the vault was running out. America held 22,000 tons of gold. By 1971, it was down to barely 8,000 tons. The numbers no longer made sense. There were far more dollars floating in the world than America had gold to back them. The imbalance was becoming impossible to ignore. And then came that Sunday night, August 15th, 1971. Richard Nixon gathered his advisors at Camp David, in total secrecy, away from markets, away from the press, away from the world. The decision they made in that room has a name: the Nixon Shock. That night, Nixon announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars into gold. The Bretton Woods contract, the foundation of the entire global financial order, was over. Just like that. He called it temporary. It was not temporary. That was 50 years ago. The gold window has never reopened. What followed was not an explosion. It was something quieter, and in many ways more dangerous. Because when the anchor to gold was cut, money became infinitely flexible. Governments could now expand currency far more freely than before. They no longer needed gold in a vault. They needed only a printing press, and slowly, subtly, the world changed. Inflation, which had been relatively contained under the gold standard, began to climb. By the late 1970s, inflation in the United States was running at nearly 14% per year. The dollar you earned on Monday was worth less by Friday. Working people, people who saved, who were careful, who did everything they were supposed to do, watched their savings quietly dissolve. Not in a crash, not in a visible disaster, just in the slow, invisible erosion of purchasing power. The machine was running, and ordinary people were feeding it, without knowing it existed. Here's the deeper truth. When money is tied to gold, governments are constrained. They cannot spend what they do not have. They cannot promise what they cannot deliver. Gold is a leash on power, and on August 15, 1971, that leash was removed. What came after was not just a financial shift. It was a transfer of power. Governments could now borrow endlessly. Central banks could create money at will. The distance between the financial elite and the working class, between those who understand the system and those who simply live inside it, began to widen. Global debt in 1971 was manageable. Today, global debt exceeds $300 trillion. That is not a number that exists in nature. That is a number that exists because money became a belief system. And the belief was kept alive by force, by habit, and by the simple fact that no one had an alternative ready. Think about what money actually is now. It is not a thing. It is a system built on shared belief. A story told by governments, enforced by law, and believed by billions of people simultaneously. The moment you stop believing, it stops working. That is not metaphor. That is the operating mechanism. Every dollar you hold is worth something only because someone else agrees that it is. And that agreement was constructed, deliberately, by people in rooms you never saw, and yet were never covered by the news you watched. The gold standard did not collapse by accident. It was ended by choice, by a small number of people on a Sunday night, who decided that the constraint of reality was inconvenient. We live in the world they built that night. Every mortgage, every salary, every savings account, every pension, every price tag in every store in every city on this planet, all of it operates inside a system that was fundamentally redesigned in 1971. And yet, almost no one knows the exact date. Almost no one can tell you what changed. They feel it, perhaps, in the cost of housing, in the shrinking power of their wages, in the strange sense that no matter how hard they work, something always feels slightly out of reach. That feeling has a history. That feeling has a date, August 15th, 1971. Money is not neutral. It is not a passive tool that simply measures value. It is a technology, a system of control, a mirror of the values of whoever designs it. When money was tied to gold, it had a kind of democracy to it. A gold coin did not care if you were a king or a farmer. It held its value regardless of who held the coin. But when money became paper, truly paper, backed by nothing but political will, it became something else entirely. It became a question of trust. And trust can be manufactured. And things that can be manufactured can be manipulated. The question is not whether the gold's perfect. It was not. The question is what we lost when we abandoned it. We lost the anchor. We lost the honest constraint. We lost the mechanism that forced accountability, that said, you cannot spend what does not exist. And in its place we built a world of infinite promises, a world where debt is not a problem to be solved, but a tool to be managed. A world where the value of your savings is decided not by what you earned, but by what someone in a central bank decides overnight. That is the world you live in. And now you know when it began, not with a war, not with a crash, not with chaos in the streets, with a Sunday night announcement, a quiet decision, a door that closed and never reopened. The money in your pocket is real in the sense that it works. People accept it. Stores take it. The system functions. But it is real the way a stage set is real. It holds as long as everyone agrees to believe. The moment that belief fractures, the entire architecture shakes. History does not always announce itself. Sometimes it happens on a Sunday, in a room most people will never hear about, and the world wakes up changed, without knowing what changed. That is the most important lesson has ever taught us. Power does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it moves in silence, and understanding that silence is the beginning of real financial literacy. And yet, for all this system still powers the modern world, from global trade to everyday transactions. If this gave you a new perspective, and subscribe. History has the answers. Most people just never ask the right questions.